The sky was supposed to be a bridge to a happy Christmas reunion, but instead it became a doorway to a nightmare that no human being was ever meant to survive. Imagine being 17 years old sitting in a cramped airplane seat, clutching your mother's hand while the world outside the window turns into a violent swirl of black clouds and jagged lightning. This is the story of Julianne Koepka, name that would soon be etched into history as the girl who fell from the sky and walked out of the green. Hell alive. It was December 24th, 1971, a day of joy for millions, but for the 92 souls aboard Lanza Flight 508, it was the beginning of the end. Julianne and her mother Maria were traveling from Lima to Pucallpa to meet her father, a famous biologist. The flight was short, just an hour, but as they crossed the treacherous peaks of the Andes Mountains, the atmosphere turned hostile. The plane began to bounce like a toy in the hands of a giant, and suddenly the cabin went dark. People were screaming, luggage was flying through the air, and then a blinding flash of white light struck the right wing. The engine exploded, and the plane simply broke apart in mid-air. Julianne felt the sickening sensation of weightlessness. She wasn't in a seat anymore. She was falling, strapped to a row of 3 chairs, spinning like a helicopter seed toward the dense canopy of the Peruvian Amazon 2 miles below. She remembers the wind whistling past her ears and the terrifying sight of the green carpet rushing up to meet her. Then there was only silence. She woke up the next morning under the shade of the trees. Her vision was blurred and her collarbone was shattered, but she was alive. She called for her mother over and over, but the only response was the buzzing of flies and the distant roar of howler monkeys. Julianne was the daughter of 2 world-class biologists. She had spent years living in the jungle with them, learning its secrets, and those secrets were about to save her life. She knew she couldn't stay near the wreckage because the trees were too thick for rescue planes to see her. She found a small bag of candy, the only food she would have for the next 11 days, and she began to walk. Her eye was swollen shut from the impact, and her body was covered in deep gashes, but her mind was sharp. She remembered her father's golden rule for survival in the jungle: always follow the water. She found a tiny trickle of a stream and started walking downstream, knowing it would eventually lead to a larger river and perhaps to civilization. The Amazon is not just a forest, it is a living, breathing predator. The heat was suffocating, reaching over 90 degrees with humidity so thick it felt like breathing underwater. Every step was a battle against sinking mud and hidden dangers. She had lost her glasses in the fall, so she had to feel her way through the undergrowth. She saw colorful frogs that she knew were poisonous and heard the rustle of jaguars in the distance. But the worst enemy wasn't the big predators, it was the insects. Flies laid eggs in her open wounds, and soon hundreds of maggots were eating her flesh alive, causing an agonizing itch and pain that kept her awake at night. By the 4th day, she heard the sound of search planes circling high above, but the canopy was a solid roof of green. She tried to wave, but it was useless. They couldn't see a lone girl in a torn summer dress walking through a green ocean. She felt a crushing sense of loneliness, knowing that everyone else on that flight was likely dead, and she was the only one left to tell the story. On the 6th day, the stream turned into a river. The water was dark and murky, hiding crocodiles and stingrays. Julianne had to swim in the middle of the river because the banks were too overgrown to walk on. She was exhausted, her legs were like lead, and her stomach was screaming for food, but she didn't stop. She floated with the current, letting the river carry her weak body toward an unknown fate. She was hallucinating, seeing phantom houses and hearing voices that weren't there, but her instinct to live was stronger than her desire to give up. By the 9th day, she stumbled upon a small boat tied to a riverbank. She thought it was another hallucination, but when she touched the cold wood, she knew it was real. Nearby, there was a small hut used by lumbermen. She crawled inside and found a can of gasoline. She remembered her father once treating a dog with maggots using kerosene, so she poured the gasoline over her infected arm. The pain was like fire, but as the maggots crawled out of her skin, she felt a grim sense of relief. She stayed in that hut for the night, shivering with fever and praying for someone to come. The next morning, 3 men appeared. They were terrified at first, thinking she was a blonde water goddess from their local myths, but when she spoke in Spanish and told them she was from the crashed plane, they wept and carried her to safety. Julianne had survived a 2-mile fall and 11 days in the most brutal environment on Earth. When she was finally reunited with her father, the world watched in disbelief. She led the search teams back to the wreckage, where they found the remains of the plane and confirmed confirmed that she was indeed the sole survivor of Lanza Flight 508. This story isn't just about a miracle, it is about the resilience of the human spirit and the power knowledge. Julianne Coep didn't just survive by luck. She survived because she refused to be a victim. She took her fear and turned it into a map. Today, she is a celebrated biologist who dedicated her life to protecting the very jungle that tried to claim her. She proved that even when you are falling through the clouds, and even when the world is dark and full of shadows, there is always a path home if you have the courage to keep walking. Her story reminds us that no matter how deep the jungle of our own lives, maybe we are never truly lost as long as we keep moving forward toward the light. The cottage was thick with the scent of pine and old books, a stark contrast to the sterile emptiness I had left behind in the main house. And as I watched Elena struggle with her heavy suitcases on the gravel driveway, I felt a strange sense of detachment, like I was watching a character in a movie whose ending had already been written. She kept looking back at the dark windows of the mansion, hoping perhaps to see a flicker of the mother she thought she could control, but that woman had died the moment the bank notification chimed on my phone. I remembered the winters when I had gone without a new coat just so she could have the trendiest boots for school, and I remembered the nights I stayed up late stitching her dance costumes with fingers that ached from the cold, and yet she had looked at my pension as nothing more than a ticket to a beach. She didn't realize that every dollar she spent was a piece of my dignity she was throwing into the ocean as the moon rose higher, casting long, jagged shadows across the lawn. I thought about the first time I held her and how I promised to protect her from the world, never imagining that I would one day need protection from her own greed. The silence of the night was broken only by the sound of a distant owl, but inside me there was a symphony of liberation, playing a melody I hadn't heard in 40 years. I began to think about the items I had sold, not as losses, but as liberation. The grandfather clock that used to tick like a heartbeat in the hallway was gone, and with it the constant reminder of time slipping away under her thumb. I recalled the expression on the antique dealer's face when I handed him the keys to the china cabinet. He looked at me with a mix of pity and respect, but I didn't need his pity, I only needed his check and the freedom it bought me. I spent the next few hours in the cottage kitchen preparing a small pot of tea, not the cheap dusty bags Elena used to buy for me, but a fine loose leaf jasmine that smelled like a spring morning in a garden I never got to visit. I poured the tea into a cracked but beautiful porcelain cup and felt the warmth seep into my bones, thinking about how many years I had settled for lukewarm leftovers while she dined out on my sacrifices. The next morning the sun rose with a fierce golden light, and I saw Elena sitting on the steps of the porch, her hair disheveled and her expensive tan looking muddy in the morning light. She didn't look like a conqueror anymore, she looked like a lost child, but I knew better than to let that look soften my heart. I knew that if I let her back in, the cycle would only begin again, and the next time there would be nothing left for me to sell to save myself. She tried to knock on the cottage door, her voice cracking as she called out my name, saying she was sorry, saying she didn't mean to leave me with nothing. But the words felt hollow, like wind whistling through a graveyard. I didn't answer. I simply sat by the window and watched a sparrow building a nest in the eaves of the cottage, and I thought about how much stronger that tiny bird was than I had been for so long. I started to write in a small leather-bound journal documenting the sensations of my new life, the way the floorboards felt under my bare feet, and the way the air tasted when it wasn't filtered through the expectations of a daughter who saw me as a burden. I realized that for years I had been shrinking myself, trying to fit into the small corner of the life she had designed for me. But now the walls were gone, and I was expanding to fill the space I deserved. I thought about the ruby brooch again, the one she had taken without asking, and I realized that the stone wasn't what made it valuable. It was the memory of my mother's voice telling me to always keep my head high. And even though the brooch was gone, the voice was louder than ever. Before I spent the afternoon walking through the woods behind the property, feeling the crunch of dry leaves under my boots and listening to the secrets the trees whispered to each other. They didn't care about pensions or Miami trips or designer bags. They only cared about growing toward the light. And for the first time, I felt like I was doing the same. I thought about the friends I had lost touch with because Elena told me they were a bad influence or that they only wanted my money. And I realized she was projecting her own heart onto everyone else. I reached out to an old friend that evening, a woman I hadn't spoken to in 5 years, and when she heard my voice, she didn't ask for explanations. She only asked when she could come over for tea. We sat on the porch of the cottage as the sun set, talking about everything and nothing, and the laughter that bubbled up from my chest felt like a long-forgotten friend returning home. Elena was still there in the distance, pacing the perimeter of the property like a caged animal, but she was no longer the center of my universe. She was just a ghost in the background of a much more beautiful story. I began to plan my small garden, imagining rows of lavender and rosemary, and perhaps a single rose bush that would bloom even in the harshest winter. I didn't need a mansion to be happy. I only needed a space where I was respected and where my worth wasn't measured in what I could provide for someone else. The days turned into weeks, and the transformation of my soul was complete. I no longer woke up with a knot of anxiety in my stomach, wondering if I had done enough to please her. Instead, I woke up and asked myself what I wanted to do, and the answer was usually something simple like reading a book by the fire or taking a long walk in the rain. I saw Elena one last time before she finally gave up and moved into a small apartment in the city. She looked tired and aged by the weight of her own choices, and for a fleeting second I felt a pang of motherly sorrow, but then I remembered the empty grit box and the hunger that had gnawed at my stomach while she was sipping cocktails by the pool, and the sorrow vanished, replaced by a calm resolve. I told her that I loved her, but that I loved myself more, and that was a lesson she should have learned long ago. She left without saying goodbye, and the silence that followed was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I stood in the middle of my small cottage, looking at the few things I had left: a photograph of my husband, a stack of well-worn books, and the jasmine tea, and I realized that I was richer now than I had ever been in that big empty house. The legacy of the silent revenge wasn't just about the money or the furniture. It was about reclaiming the narrative of my own life and showing the world that even an old woman has claws when you try to take her dignity. I am no longer a curator of a museum of the past. I am the architect of my own future, and every breath I take is a testament to the strength that was always there, hidden under layers of politeness and sacrifice. The sun is setting now, casting a warm amber glow over my small garden, and as I sit here with my tea, I know that I have finally come home, not to a house, but to myself, and that is a victory that no one can ever steal from me again. The echoes of the past are fading, and the only voice I hear now is my own, steady and clear and full of peace, because I have learned that the best way to honor the people we were is to become the people we were always meant to be, even if it takes a lifetime to get there. Realization, I took the black card from my worn-out purse and laid it on the table, telling them the dinner was on me because I didn't want them to feel the sting of a bill they couldn't afford to pay with their pride. I told Beatrice to keep her $500 and use it to buy some class, though I doubted any store sold it in her size. I looked at my son and saw the man I had raised finally waking up from the nightmare of vanity. I walked out of that restaurant, and the night air never felt so sweet. I didn't wait for the valet. I didn't wait for a car. I just walked into the rain, letting the water wash away the dust of the character I had played. I left them sitting in the wreckage of their own judgment, because because wealth is not what you carry in your hands, it is what you carry in your soul. And I had finally taught my son that his mother was not a shadow, but the very light that had kept him warm all his life. I went home to my simple apartment, and I sat in the dark listening to the heart of. The city beat, and I knew that the game was over, but the truth had finally set us free, because at the end of the day, we are all just stories, and I wanted mine to be one of courage, not of coin. I am Alara, and I am finally whole. And as the sun began to rise over the skyline, I saw my reflection in the window not as a poor widow or a secret billionaire, but as a woman who had finally found the balance between the power she held and the love she gave. The world would never be the same for any of us, but for the first time in 30 years, I could breathe without the weight of a secret pressing against my heart. I was no longer a ghost. I was the storm and the calm and everything in between. Arguments they had had over bills and ambitions, but now those ghosts were being laid to rest by the sheer gravity of the truth. Martha walked to the window and traced the line of the coast with her finger, telling Alara that the land deeds in that bag represented more than just soil. They were the silent guardians of their family's dignity. And even though the beach house was sold, the earth beneath it still whispered their name, because some contracts are written in spirit rather than ink. Alara stood up, her legs shaky, but her heart finally finding its rhythm, and she asked what they should do now that the world thought they were paupers. And Martha turned, her eyes shining with a fierce celestial light, and said, "We will let them think we are broken while we build a palace out of our secrets." She described a plan not of revenge, but of quiet reclamation, explaining how they would use the capital from the trust to buy back the very car Alara had sold, and how they would watch the new owners of the beach house from the cliffs above, knowing that the soul of the place had already moved out with them. They spent the night on the floor, sharing a single blanket and a bottle of water, talking until the stars began to fade. And for the first time in a decade, Alara didn't check her emails or worry about her reputation. She just listened to the stories of her ancestors, of the women who had survived wars and famines with nothing but a leather bag and an iron will, and she realized that she was the latest link in a chain that was forged in fire. Martha told her that the daughter who walked into this house yesterday was a merchant, but the daughter walking out today was a guardian, and that was a transformation no amount of currency could ever buy. As the first light of dawn touched the horizon, Martha led Alara out to the porch for one last look at the ocean. The air was cold and sharp, stinging their lungs with the scent of salt and beginning. And Alara reached out to take her mother's hand, feeling the callous strength that had held their entire world together. In secret, she promised she would spend the rest of her life earning the right to carry that satchel, and Martha just nodded, knowing that the lesson had finally taken root. They walked down the stairs for the last time, leaving the empty shell of their past behind. But as they reached the end of the driveway, Alara stopped and looked back at the house, noticing for the first time the way the light hit the eaves in a way that made it look like it was weeping. She understood now that her mother wasn't just a woman, she was a monument to endurance, and that the beach house was never the prize, it was only the classroom where she had finally learned how to be a daughter again. Martha started the engine of their humble rental car, and as they drove away into the golden haze of the morning, she didn't look back once, because she knew that as long as they had each other and the truth, they were the wealthiest people on the face of the earth, and the road ahead of them wasn't just a path to a new house, but a journey toward a legacy that would never be for sale again. In the library of my new home, surrounded by the books Thomas and I had collected over a lifetime, the walls were lined with leather-bound volumes, and and the air smelled of old paper and beeswax, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't known in decades, a sense that the cycle of betrayal and redemption had finally come to a close. Clara's transformation was not just about hard work, it was about the shedding of a skin that had grown too tight for her. She began to visit the local library to read to the children, to bake cookies for the maintenance crew, and to listen to the birds in the morning. She found joy in the small things, in the steam rising from a cup of tea, in the sound of rain on the roof, in the warmth of a shared laugh. She was no longer a woman of sharp edges. She was a woman of soft curves and deep wells of compassion. The beach house became our sanctuary, a place where we could leave the noise of the city behind and listen to the pulse of the tide. We would walk along the shore for miles, collecting shells and sea glass and talking about the things that really mattered. We talked about Thomas and the way he used to whistle while he worked in the garden, and the way he always knew exactly what to say to make me feel safe. We talked about the future, not as a target to be hit, but as a horizon to be explored. Clara started to dream again, not of corporate boardrooms and stock options, but of a life that was integrated and whole. She wanted to start a community garden in the heart of the city, a place where people could come to grow their own food and find a sense of belonging. I watched her with a pride that was almost overwhelming, a pride that was rooted in the knowledge that she had become the woman she was always meant to be. The walnut box remained on my nightstand, a silent witness to the journey we had taken. It was no longer a secret treasure, but a reminder of the enduring power of foresight and love. Thomas had seen the storm coming, and he had built us a boat that could weather any tide. As the years passed, the story of the woman who sold her mother's life and found her own soul became a legend in our small community, a story that reminded people that it is never too late to turn back and find the right path. And as I sit here now in the twilight of my life with Clara by my side and the sound of the ocean in my ears, I know that I am truly blessed. I have seen the darkest shadows and the brightest lights, and I have learned that the greatest wealth is not found in the things we own, but in the people we love and the lessons we carry in our hearts. So, if you ever find yourself standing in the ruins of a life you thought was secure, remember the walnut box. Remember that there is always a secret reserve of strength and wisdom waiting to be found, and remember that a mother's love, like the tide, will always find its way back to the shore, no matter how far it has been pushed away. The moon is high now, casting a silver glow over the waves, and the world is quiet, and still Clara is asleep in the guest room, her breath steady and peaceful, and I am here with Thomas's letter in my hand, feeling the warmth of his words and the presence of his spirit. We are okay, my love, I whisper to the darkness. We are more than okay. Justice has been served, but better yet, love has been restored, and that is the greatest victory of all. Would you like me to create an image of the walnut box, or perhaps a cinematic video scene depicting Martha and Clara on the beach house porch at sunset? Hope you enjoyed the video. If you found it helpful, don't forget to subscribe to Liberty Legends for more. Hit that like button to support the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.